phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
A couple weeks ago, I made a video about 5 college football stars you may have forgotten about. And in today's video, I am going to be making a part 2, talking about 5 college football stars you may have forgotten about. Just a quick disclaimer before I move on. I'm not saying everyone in this video is forgotten by everybody, as there's probably a good amount of people that actually do remember these players and their college football days, but they don't necessarily think of them the first time they think of a certain team or really a certain career at all. This is kind of just reshaping a light on these players and such. Not meant to say that you guys have all forgotten about them, but some may have, and that's why I have this video to talk about these 5 college football players. Now before I move on, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's get into it. The first player I'm going to be talking about in this video is quarterback Vernon Adams. Now Vernon Adams started his college football career at Eastern Washington, where in 3 seasons as the starting quarterback, he went 28-6 as a starter. He completed 65% of his passes, threw for 10,438 yards, while throwing for 110 touchdowns, 31 interceptions, and rushing for over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns in his career at Eastern Washington. In his time at Eastern Washington, he was a 2-time Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year and a 2-time First-Team All-Big Sky Conference member. After his last season at Eastern Washington, in the 2014 college football season, he would end up transferring for his final year of eligibility to Oregon for 2015. In his one lone season at Oregon, Vernon Adams played pretty well, in which in 10 games played, he completed 65% of his passes, threw for 2,643 yards, 26 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, and 2 total touchdowns on the ground. He was a Pac-12 Newcomer of the Year and an honorable mention All Pac-12 team member. In his college football career, he would throw for over 13,000 yards, 136 touchdown passes thrown, and 13 total touchdowns on the ground. However, in the 2016 NFL Draft, Vernon Adams went undrafted, and his only shot with the NFL has been a couple rookie minicamp invites in which nothing really ever rose from it. He never signed with an NFL team officially and never competed in a preseason. After not making an NFL team, he would end up going the Canadian Football League route, in which he's been a part of the Canadian Football League since 2016. He's primarily been with the Montreal Alouettes, and he's been a starter for a total of these last 2 seasons, and initially wasn't the starter heading into this current 2022 season, but recently did start the last game for Montreal. In his Canadian Football League career, he has completed 62% of his passes, has thrown for 6,694 yards, 42 touchdown passes, 24 interceptions, and 19 total touchdowns on the ground in his Canadian Football League career. On to the next player. It is another quarterback, this time Mason Fine from North Texas. Now Mason Fine at North Texas, he was kind of an under-the-radar quarterback. He played in the Conference USA, he played at North Texas, and he was undersized, but that did not stop him from being a very electric quarterback in his career. As a 4-year starting quarterback at North Texas, he completed 63% of his passes, threw for 12,505 yards, 93 touchdown passes through the air, 34 interceptions, and a total of 7 rushing touchdowns in his career. Mason Fine did pick up some accolades in his time at North Texas, as he was a 2-time Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year, 2-time first All-Conference USA member, and a second-team All-Conference USA member in 2019. He had a really good career at North Texas, where he was a star and one of their best players in program history. But he would end up going undrafted in the 2020 NFL Draft, and once he went undrafted, his biggest opportunity he had with the NFL was a tryout with the Chicago Bears, which nothing really ever came of it, and he's been in the CFL since with Saskatchewan. This next player that I'm going to be talking about is also a quarterback during his collegiate career, but he didn't start off as one. He was actually a defensive back at Georgia, and after being dismissed, he ended up at the JUCO level where he played quarterback and found his way at Auburn as their quarterback, and it's none other than Nick Marshall. I will say Nick Marshall wasn't the craziest quarterback ever to grace the game, but he was a good quarterback at that. And even though his career numbers aren't the most eye-popping, he completed 60% of his passes, threw for 4,508 yards, 34 touchdown passes, and 13 interceptions as a starting quarterback for his 2 seasons at Auburn, while also rushing for 1,866 yards and 23 total touchdowns on the ground. A big thing that Nick Marshall did at Auburn is that he helped lead them to not only an SEC championship win, the title, he also led them to the BCS National Championship game as a first-year starting quarterback. And it's worth noting that the year before he actually showed up to Auburn, they went 3-9. So Nick Marshall was pretty crucial for the Auburn Tiger program. Despite being invited to the 2015 Senior Bowl as a quarterback, Nick Marshall thought it would be better if he switched back to cornerback to help prolong his NFL career. In the 2015 NFL Draft, Nick Marshall would end up going undrafted, and shortly thereafter he signed with Jacksonville. Nick Marshall would be in the NFL from 2015 to 2016 with Jacksonville and the Jets. He would end up being suspended in the 2017 NFL offseason for testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and he would end up being released by the Jets because of it, and he has not been in the NFL since then. After the NFL, he would have a stint with the Indoor Football League with the Arizona Rattlers, but he would then hit it big for his football career, talking about pro-wise, with the Canadian Football League with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. In his Canadian Football League career with Saskatchewan since 2018, Nick Marshall has a total of 65 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 5 interceptions in his career. With this next player, it is running back from Kansas, Pooka Williams. Now, Pooka Williams in his career at Kansas was a great and electric player and a bright spot for a Kansas team that was, well, to keep it short, not very good. In his career as a Jayhawk, being a starting running back for 3 seasons, he rushed for 2,382 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry, 12 total touchdowns on the ground, and 4 total touchdowns through the air. His best season by far, in my opinion, was in 2018, in which he rushed for 1,125 yards, averaging 7 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns on the ground, and 2 total touchdowns through the air. In his career as well as a Jayhawk, he would rack up such accolades as a 2-time first-team All-Big 12 member and the Big 12 Offensive Freshman Player of the Year in 2018. Going into 2020, he was seen as one of the best running backs in college football and was expected to have his best season yet. But after 4 games, he would opt out of the 2020 season to take care of his ill mother. In those 4 games he played in, he rushed for 196 yards, averaging nearly 4 yards per carry, and had 2 total touchdowns on the ground. It wasn't necessarily the best start, and opting out the season and not having the best start in 2020, it did kind of make his draft stock decline, and he would end up going undrafted in the 2021 NFL Draft. Shortly after going undrafted, he would sign with the Cincinnati Bengals, and he would primarily be on their practice squad during the 2021 NFL season, but he would be called up to the active roster primarily as a return specialist. On to the final player in today's video. I'm switching it over to the defensive side of the ball. Now, Jeremy Cash, he started off his career at Ohio State, but he made his name for himself at Duke, as in his 3 years at Duke, he totaled with 332 tackles, 38 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, and 6 total interceptions in his career. It's also worth mentioning that he had 14 pass deflections, 5 fumble recoveries, and 9 forced fumbles in his time at Duke. He was a standout his entire career at Duke, but the year they had the most recognition about him as a player was in 2015, where he was a consensus All-American, ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and a finalist for the Thorpe Award, which is given to the best defensive back, which he did not win, but he was a finalist. Going into the 2016 NFL Draft, Jeremy Cash was seen as a 3rd to 4th round pick, but he would end up going undrafted, and he would end up signing with the Carolina Panthers as an undrafted free agent, and he was going to be making the transition from safety to outside linebacker. Cash would be in the NFL from 2016 to 2018, spending time with the Panthers, Jets, Giants, Browns, and ending his career with the Cardinals. During his time in the NFL, he racked up a total of 6 tackles. He had some injury issues during the NFL, and in fact, he ended his NFL career suffering a torn ACL and MCL during a preseason game with the Arizona Cardinals in 2018, in which he was placed on injury reserve, and he has not played in the NFL since then. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on those post notifications, and subscribe if you haven't already. Be Kelly out.